Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Films and Stuff. I'm Ethan, as always, joined by the Batman, Pete, to my Robin. Pete, what's up today? How are you doing?
I am good. Robin, how are you?
Good. In fact, maybe we should switch up the alter egos because we're talking about a different film franchise today, which is Indiana Jones.
All right, I call dibs on short round. You can be Indy.
Those are really the only two characters. So we're talking about Dr. Henry Walton Jones Jr., informally known as Indiana after his dog, Jones, right? So the reason we're talking about this franchise is that the fifth installment, after a dramatic delay, has it been 20 years since Crystal Skull came out?
The Crystal Skull came out in 2008, so 15 years.
15 years later, new Indiana Jones is coming out. It's coming out this week. So Pete and I thought we would take a little trip down memory lane and do like some preparatory work for ourselves and for you all listeners, so that we understand exactly what happened in these prior four Indiana Joneses. I will just lay out the time frame and then we can dive in however you want, because I have to say, it's been a long time since I thought about this. Everything was really fuzzy and mixed up in my head. But Raiders of the Lost Ark came out in 1981. Can you believe it? Temple of Doom came out in 1984. Although, if we look at the plot timelines, Raiders of the Lost Ark was 1938, and Temple of Doom was actually a prequel, 1935. And then the third one was Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which came out in 1989. And then we had Crystal Skull that came out all the way 19 years later in 2008, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So I have to say, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, just to put in time frame, that was set in 1957. So if you're looking at the real story timelines, it goes 1935, 1936, 1938, and then 1957.
Right. And now with Dial of Destiny, 1969.
1969. So technically 12 years after Crystal Skull, even though in real time it's 15 years, somewhat consistent with the time frames, right? It's Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom, and Last Crusade, which are kind of mixed up just because Temple of Doom was the prequel. There's two things that I had to think about when I was watching these films. I didn't watch the whole thing. I watched either YouTube clips or I kind of like watched them quickly online. They are dated for two reasons. That one, these are 1980s films, which, you know, if you've seen them, the style is very, very old, right, compared to what we see now. And then they're depicting things in 1930s, which is a century ago, right? So you really have to put yourselves kind of into two different mindsets.
Yeah. In fact, I would say there's probably a third mindset, right? Because you have the practical mindset, which is this is a movie that's now 40 years old.
Right.
It's a depiction of almost literally 100 years ago.
Right.
And then the third thing is that it's from the viewpoint of the mindset of what people thought was acceptable and funny in the 80s.
Yeah.
Right? Which... this is not a comment about the concept of woke ideology. It's just a practical comment about the fact that things don't age well because cultural opinions shift, right? So
there's some cringiness in here, right?
Absolutely. And look, you know, we'll talk about it when we talk about Temple of Doom, but like some of the depictions in Temple of Doom, I mean, really for our generation, that movie, good or bad, and by the way, I don't think any of these movies were really bad per se, but like that movie in particular laid the groundwork for how a lot of people saw, or interacted with Indians, for example.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying that that's a good thing. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying, look, this is the frank reality is that for example, growing up, and then not just growing up, but even in high school, even in college, would get a lot of comments and references to the Temple of Doom.
Yeah.
Half jokingly, but maybe with a hint of seriousness, who knows, right? And I couldn't care less because I'm not that, I don't want to say sensitive, but like it doesn't bother me as much. But I can understand why that kind of depiction could be seen negatively by a lot of others.
To put myself in your shoes, if you don't mind, and let's maybe I'll highlight what I think were the scenes in Temple of Doom that I thought were a little bit cringy. So, for example, when you're watching Temple of Doom, I think this movie starts very, very slow. It is not an Indiana Jones movie. When you go back to Raiders of the Lost Ark, right, which is the first time that we're introduced to the Indiana Jones character, that's kind of the right way I thought to be introduced to him. Yeah. Right? I mean, this is all the way there in the jungle safari-ish type, right? You show kind of like some aborigines or natives, with the poison dart blowguns and things. You see Indiana crossing like all the different booby traps, right? You've got the famous scene where he swaps out this gold idol, with a bag of sand, and then it slowly sinks. The boulder chasing him. This is actually a very, very iconic start to that film, right?
And like heavily parodied in other movies and TV shows.
And as far as I'm aware, that's very original content.
Absolutely.
Like there's the brilliance of Spielberg,
George Lucas,
and your favorite, Kathleen Kennedy was a producer. So anyway, those are very iconic scenes. Then you cut to, him being a professor. You really see a lot of Indiana Jones and who he is, I think, in Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? That's why it's so iconic. And I've also noticed a lot of that movie is shot outside. There's many scenes where he's driving on the trucks, where he's on the train. There's the fight scene in front of the airplane and the propellers. It's a very outdoor movie. Then you skip 3 years later, 1984, the prequel. That's a very dark movie. It starts off in Shanghai.
Yeah.
The scene with him and kind of like this Asian gangster. Super silly stuff, right? I wasn't even sure if it was cringy because it was just like so bad, like the gangsters were like so over the top with like the evil laughter. And
yeah, it also felt a little out of place that an archaeology professor would be dealing with that.
Yeah.
Like
it was
if you
very
were
James Bondish.
If he were a CIA agent, I would kind of get that, but okay, that's fine.
For someone that we saw only in a leather jacket, and what's this hat called? I want to call it a fedora.
A fedora?
But it's not is that a fedora?
I guess, or a Stetson.
Yeah, it's a Stetson. You're right. Fedoras, I think, are cleaner. That's a Stetson.
Sure.
Right. So, I mean, like, he's very out of place, I think, in this opening scene. Maybe that's intentional to make it a little bit broader because it's a sequel by all intents. One thing I caught, I don't know if you saw it again, there's a shot of the name of the club. The name of the club is called Club Obi-Wan.
Lucas and Spielberg are not just longtime collaborators, but they're really good friends in real life as well. So.
Okay, but then we get to the scene where they end up in India, and I think this is where it becomes a little bit cringy, and not just cringy because it's borderline racist. It's just wrong, I think. So they show like the foods that people are eating, and they show like a snake, like some type of, I don't want to call it like a boa constrictor, but a very big snake.
Yeah.
And they cut open the snake and little snakes come out and people are eating them raw.
Yeah.
As far as I'm aware, India is primarily known for vegetarian cuisine, right? I don't know that this is even a legitimate.
And I mean, the logistics, snakes lay eggs. They don't.
Yeah. They're not live.
Yeah.
True. Not even biologically correct. Then they showed kind of like people eating cockroaches, like a little bit as oysters.
Yeah.
Again, I don't even know this is a thing, but as far as I'm aware, it's absolutely not an Indian thing. Again, it's a culture based a lot.
It's certainly
on
not a stereotype
deterrent.
when you think of Indian cuisine. Absolutely not.
And then they show, remember,
the chilled monkey brains,
the monkey brains, and the eyeball soup. And the eyeball soup is like human eyeballs.
Yeah.
It was very, I understand they're trying to make it seem very gross and
exotic.
It didn't come off as funny. For me, it wasn't even, it was potentially racist, but it wasn't even that racist. It was more cringy because it wasn't even like the stereotypical take on traditional Indian cuisine, I thought. Yeah. How do you feel?
I hesitate to call the depiction itself racist. And maybe it is. I'm not an authority on what is and what isn't considered racism, because I think that's also a very subjective thing.
Yeah.
I can tell you that when I saw that movie first, as a younger person, more like a kid, I was grossed out, and at the same time, like, oh my God, that's kind of cool, you know?
Yeah.
I think what that did, though, was it was a gateway towards receiving a lot of racist comments towards me as an Indian guy.
Yeah.
And I don't think it bothered me as much, but that's me. And I'm not saying I'm made of stronger stuff. That's not what I'm saying at all. Maybe I'm more desensitized to that kind of stuff, which is also a bad thing. But I can fully understand and I can fully accept if somebody saw that depiction and was like, dude, that is an insult to my culture. That's an insult to my people. What are you talking about? Who eats monkey brains anywhere? You know what I mean? Like,
it's not even a thing. Is eyeball soup even a thing?
Well, not as far as I know anywhere, right? So
but it's kind of like the 80s humor, though.
Exactly. And that's what I meant by that third perspective, which is you have to look at it in that vein, which is to say the eyeglasses that you have to use is to remember that we are watching a movie in 2023. 40 years prior, this
40 years ago, right? You can kind of see people on the set like, hey, what would be really disgusting? Let's eat cockroaches. You know, like that will be funny. You know, like I don't think it was like intentionally racist or even like inadvertently racist. I think it was just trying to be silly, gross, and it just came off as now kind of like, Spielberg, not your best look, you know?
Yeah. But again, at that time, you know, everyone loved it, right? Which again, fine. It's just an indication of the times, which is fine.
Right. And then the rest of Temple of Doom, the lighting is very dark. Themes are very dark. You know, there's human sacrifice and kind of this voodoo doll, and I can't remember how I felt when I watched it in cinemas, but when I watched it now, it's like, oh my God, this is just so boring. It wasn't even cringy, like uncomfortable. It's just like, ugh, this is so lame. Like, move on, come on. What isn't even like a storyline, you know?
One of the things that made me really always like an Indiana Jones movie was that there was some MacGuffin that they were chasing. And it was usually something mythological and generally speaking had a legend attached to it. Whereas Temple of Doom, the main bad guy, you're talking about a guy who's a practitioner of a religion, and that too a real one. And Shiva stones are a real thing. And obviously, when you start talking about this bad guy who's a practitioner of this very specific subsect of Hindu religion, who's then using it as like an evil shaman and pulling people's hearts out. That's more like on the voodoo side of things. And that is not what I think of when I think of Indiana Jones. I think of him chasing after the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, a crystal skull, a dial of destiny, some kind of obviously not real, but attached to some mythological item that's loosely connected to, you know, religion or something. Whereas this was overtly attached to a real religion with real artifacts. That becomes more problematic. That's, I think, where I personally would see more of an issue. If you're a devout Hindu, the last thing you want to see is a depiction on screen of your religion being used as like a voodoo thing. right? And where you're literally pulling people's hearts out of chest cavities and sacrificing people. Yeah. That becomes now problematic.
Yeah, I have to say that second one was, I thought there's maybe one or two kind of like iconic scenes. I mean, following that temple sacrifice, the voodoo doll's a little bit iconic.
The rail cart scene.
The rail cart scene in the mine is very, very iconic.
Fun
right?
As well. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Then you kind of get more into the Indiana Jones style. But generally, I thought that second movie was not really a great follow-up to what was a really fun Raiders of the Lost Ark.
That was effectively reflected in the box office at the time. Raiders of the Lost Ark made like $370 million.
Back in the day, that's a huge haul though, huh?
Yeah. Temple of Doom made less than that, right? It only made $330 million. And of course, Last Crusade blew both of those out of the water with $475 million.
Yeah, and that's a good point, which is Last Crusade, I thought, was then a good redemption in terms of the style. It seemed to capture more of the original Indiana Jones style, Raiders of the Lost Ark. The introduction of his father, I thought, was a great move.
Masterstroke, yeah.
I thought that was really, really a good redemption. And then everyone just kind of like ran out of steam. They said, look, it's been 3. It's kind of run its course. No more until 2008.
When they made the first movie, they had already agreed with Paramount to do, I don't know if I misread this, or if it was either 4 movies in total or 4 sequels in total. That was kind of like the understanding they had with Paramount.
I read something very similar. I can't remember if it was 4 or 5, but I understand that they did get a deal to make multiple of these right away.
Correct.
The story that I read was that Lucas and Spielberg were both vacationing in Hawaii, I believe. And it was after Star Wars came out. And of course, like there was just massive demand for those two. They decided that they were interested in going in a different direction. And Spielberg said, hey, I want to make something like James Bond-ish. And Lucas said, I've got something even better. I've got this idea. And it was Indiana Smith at the time. And it was like an archaeological James Bond. Spielberg said, I'm 100% in. You're right. This is better than James Bond. It's a little bit different. We got to change his name, but yeah, like otherwise we can work with this. So I would assume that they went to Paramount then, which still owns it, and kind of said, hey, we want to do this thing. And they kind of pitched it as like a new James Bond and said, look, we're going to do a bunch of these. And then they signed up Harrison Ford, who's super young and like swarmy handsome, right? He's the perfect character for that, right?
Yeah.
And then the rest is kind of history.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I never saw Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I don't know how I missed it in 2008.
I know how you missed it. It's because if you didn't watch it in that first weekend and you were a fan of the Indiana Jones franchise, you were not likely to want to watch it because it received a tremendous amount of backlash from the Indiana Jones fans.
Really?
And, I didn't think it was terrible. I still think it's the weakest of the 4 that we've seen so far.
Lay it out for me. What's the storyline? What's the plot? Where do we go from here? Where is Dr. Jones? He's back teaching as a professor?
He's back teaching as a professor. In fact, I think you open, if I recall correctly, you open Crystal Skull with him on a mission. Effectively, what he does is he goes into that hangar at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where they keep the Ark.
Okay.
He's in that storage facility, and the Russians are trying to steal something from them there. And he's trying to stop that from happening. He stops it. There's a car chase sequence. Now, don't hold me to this, listeners. I haven't seen this movie since it came out, basically. And he ends up in a small town in the middle of Nevada that's seemingly deserted. And then he finds out that it's one of those small towns, but instead of people, you just see mannequins everywhere.
Huh.
And then we pan out and we see that they're doing a nuclear bomb test in this town.
Huh.
And they had the U.S. Army had set this up as a showcase as to what would happen if a nuclear bomb were to erupt inside America.
Okay.
He realizes that a bomb is about to go off, and he sits inside a fridge And then the bomb goes off. And then the fridge gets basically thrown halfway across the country. He lands and he emerges from the fridge as if nothing happened.
No big deal.
No big deal. He walks it off. And like there's a scene where, you know, the FBI catches him after because they realize what the heck is this guy doing? They're wearing hazmat suits and they're washing him down with soap and like brooms and things like that. So that's how the movie starts.
Is there time travel? There's no time travel.
No. So this is not time travel at all. He gets implicated. He gets suspended from university. And then Shia LaBeouf comes in and gets introduced as the mentee of one of his friends. He says that my mentor has gone missing. He's your best friend. We need to find him. He was in Peru looking for these things. He's got a diary, all that kind of stuff. Of course, they're chased by the Russians. So Indiana Jones realizes there's something to this story. They go down to Peru. They find out that this guy was kidnapped by not the Nazis, but effectively the 1957 version of the Nazis. It's this new like Russian threat. And we find out that not only has his best friend been kidnapped by these guys, but his girlfriend from the very first movie, Marion.
Oh, really? She's back?
She's back. And then we find out that Shia LaBeouf is actually his kid, his son, with Marion.
So hold on.
Yeah.
Crystal Skull is 2008.
Yeah.
Shia LaBeouf is like at the pinnacle of Transformers. Sam Witwicky,
the rising star as far as Spielberg is concerned.
He is. I cannot think of him as anyone other than Sam Witwicky. It's so weird. So Shia LaBeouf is the son of Indiana Jones.
Yes.
From the girl Marion in the first one, Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yes.
Which is actually the second one after Temple of Doom. Okay. And does Shia know that this is his father?
He doesn't know. And then finally, obviously, Indiana Jones puts it together first. They have a confrontation with Marion. And then, of course, everyone finds out. And then there's a little bit of that father-son tension. The usual. You know, like it's a trope that we've seen quite a few times.
Right.
The Russians are after this crystal skull. The crystal skull, we find out, is an actual, like, our bones from an alien race. And this is where things start to go a little off the rails.
Whoa. Hold on.
Because this is the other thing. Indiana Jones films are typically about Earth and Earth relics.
Yes.
And again, they're based a little bit more on mythological things based on our real life.
Yeah.
So now what you've got is a race of aliens that had come into Earth centuries ago. They're the ones who built the pyramids in Peru. And so they go to this pyramid, they get in there, they find more skulls, and apparently when you put the skulls onto the body, the aliens come back to life and grant the person one wish, as it were. And the Russian lady who's the boss is like, I want to find out the knowledge of everything everywhere all at once, basically. So the aliens grant her that wish, and she dies because it's such an inordinate amount of knowledge that her head basically explodes. And we find out that underneath this pyramid, it's actually a flying saucer. So then there's like an escape sequence. And then all of them escape.
It's Transformers.
I know. And then then like this pyramid kind of falls in on itself, and this massive flying saucer, like the old school, you know, round floating disc appears from underneath the ground, and then it flies off into space and goes to another wherever it's going. And that's where I think a lot of people were just like, what the hell? Like, this is not what we want to see with Indiana Jones. Again, I get the criticisms, and I think most of the criticisms are fair. However, the journey up to that point and a lot of the action beats and the action sequences felt very Indiana Jones-ish. I think the main problem was that because the plot went so crazy off the rails with the introduction of aliens, that everyone was just like, this is not what Indiana Jones does. Indiana Jones is not this kind of science fiction. It's fiction, but not this kind of science fiction.
I just thought of something, and you tell me if you agree with this statement. Had Indiana Jones been drafted a little bit more carefully, it could have been Pirates of the Caribbean, which is to say, it stayed in its lane. It introduced kind of a new bad guy or MacGuffin or mission every one, but it was always kind of the same formula, right? Witty, dry humor, some kind of dark humor, something funny, but it was always about pirates and pirate ships on the seas.
I think I understand what you're saying. And yes, in general, I would agree with you. The Pirates had a formula. I think the Pirates formula was a little bit more narrow because you're limited by the fact that you're, on a ship. So there's only so many mythological things you can do when it comes to a ship. Obviously, Davy Jones is one of them, mermaids, etc. All that kind of stuff you can deal with. I understand what you're saying. And I think that's exactly right. With Indiana Jones, they should stick to things which are more bound by cultural and maybe even to a lesser extent religious mythology. Right? If they do something with the Spear of Destiny, the Shroud of Turin, or all these
these real things, by the way.
These are all real things. Christian mythological. So apparently the Shroud of Turin is like the cloth that Jesus Christ was supposedly wrapped in at the time of his death or his burial. The Spear of Destiny was the spear that was used to actually spear him. Again, look, I am not a religious scholar by any means. I'm collecting from various other,
I like your disclaimer. I like the disclaimer.
So
to me, you are. I never even heard of these things. So to me, you are a scholar.
Don't excommunicate
Renaissance
me.
man.
Don't start any kind of crusade. Man. But the point is that every religion has some kind of artifact or relic that has kind of become a mythological thing, right? Does the Ark of the Covenant exist? No, probably not. Who knows? But the point is that it's become a legend within the Christian religion, for example. And for sure, that's there for the Hindu religion. For sure, that's there for Judaism. There have to be. I think that's the kind of lane it should stay in because it's not real, but at the same time, still tangentially related so that people have this interest in seeing it.
What you said at the end is exactly right. And what I was thinking also, which is people actually, and I'm a people actually aren't interested in history until you kind of entertainicize it. And then when you have something like, this is about the Ark of the Covenant, not one of these silly things that you see in a Ryan Reynolds movie that doesn't exist, but something real, like the Ark of the Covenant, or as you said, the spear or the cloth or something else, the legacy of the 10 Commandments, make it up, whatever it is. Once you have something real like that, people start to get interested in it.
Absolutely.
And then it's a really kind of cool, education exercise. Or is that a real thing? Oh my gosh, I never knew the Mayans did that, or I never knew this thing did that, or I never knew the Egyptians had that. I never knew this is kind of mythological. Does it exist or does it not exist? You could absolutely copy kind of the Pirates of the Caribbean formula. And I think if you gave Indiana Jones a sidekick, because Indiana Jones is serious. I mean, he's got a little bit of kind of dry humor, but he's generally serious. If you gave him another sidekick, more of a, not overly goofy, but a more levity type sidekick, this could be a really fun series that they could have replicated again and again and again, just kind of staying in their lane and repeating the same formula where everyone likes to go. Indiana Jones is going to get himself in a predicament. He's going to get out. It's going to be a little bit funny. There's going to be some interesting action scenes. And it's all based on something that's kind of true. 1.5 hours, you're done with the movie, you move on to the next one, right? That's a very tried and true type model.
To your point, that second part of that statement is what they tried to do with Shia LaBeouf. I think they did two things. One, I think they were trying to get that exact thing down where he becomes kind of like a sidekick. and his role was to play off of Indiana Jones. It didn't work because the attitude / personality wasn't right. Marion's worked well because they were the same age and the same level. And she was equally capable, right? Like we see her introduced. She's that bar owner in Nepal, and she's doing that drinking competition. She even beats that other guy.
That's right. Oh, classic.
Right. And that kind of gives a feeling like she's not a sidekick as much as she is his contemporary or his equal or peer in just a different field. Right. And then, of course, she's also sparring with him verbally, and she's capable. Whereas with Shia LaBeouf's character, they did a couple things that I didn't like so much. First of all, let's start with his name. He's introduced as Mutt. And I understood immediately, even like if you hadn't seen the trailers, if you didn't know who he was, immediately you'd be like, oh, well, they're obviously going to make him his son, because we all know Indiana Jones was called Indiana after his dog also. So why would you call him Mutt? I saw that instantly. The second thing was that he plays a little bit of that manic type that we see in Transformers. And also at the same time, he plays what they called a greaser. So, he's got a leather jacket. He's got the slick back hair. He's like, down with the system, man. That kind of guy, like a rebel kind of guy, like a James Dean-esque rebel. That kind of is a good foil for Indiana Jones, but maybe not really, because the difference was that Indiana Jones is also so much older. So he was just like, grow up. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't going to work. So I don't know. It just didn't work so well. And I think the second thing they tried to do with that was, I suspect they wanted to see that if Shia could really take up that mantle, I imagine they wanted him to continue on as the Indiana Jones going forward. At the end of the movie, spoiler alert, he gets married to Marion, and at the church, he drops his Stetson. And you see Shia LaBeouf pick it up, and he's about to put it on before Indiana Jones takes it away, if I remember correctly. He might not, I can't remember. But I was just like, don't do that with Indiana Jones' hat. Make your own hat your own thing. You know what I mean? Like, don't do that.
Okay, so now we've kind of recapped where we've been for the historical 4 Indiana Jones movies, kind of where it left off. Now we've had, how many years has it been? It's been 15 years? We're going to get Dial of Destiny. Tell me what we need to know about this movie and why we should care.
Let's not talk about the movie in terms of the plot for a second. We'll get back to that. I think what's important, and this is going to be a topic of discussion that is undoubtedly going to come up in the next 2 or 3 weeks. I actually think it's going to come up next weekend. So the movie comes out on Thursday or Friday at the time.
I'm going to be there. Can't wait.
I promise you, Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday at the latest, we're going to start getting articles. This movie, guess how much the budget is?
$300 million.
$295 million.
For what?
Exactly. I just don't understand how that's possible for an Indiana Jones movie. It's absurdly expensive. It's the 13th most expensive movie made all time.
Is there CGI? It's got to be because of the de-aging stuff.
Yeah, but how much of that is in there? I don't think it's going to be a lot of CGI. I don't think it's going to be a lot of de-aging. It's just absurd what's going on. I think we should have a dedicated episode about this at the end of our top 10 summer blockbuster scoring. Because this is what's going to doom this movie. If anything is going to doom this movie more than the critical response, it's going to be the box office response. It's the budget. It's $295 million, by the way, without prints and advertising. And they're not going to skimp out on advertising a Harrison Ford Indiana Jones movie. They're just not. I imagine they're spending at least another $100 million on that, if not more.
You're right. We definitely need an episode on this where we can do some research and we can kind of break down this budget and understand. I mean, to put it in perspective for me, the Mission Impossibles and the Fast films are always very expensive because there's a lot of locations, and that is obviously expensive, and they tend to also film in like very prominent areas, and that's expensive. But for Indiana Jones, I mean, I would expect that part of the business plan I would have put forth for Indiana Jones, just like Pirates of the Caribbean, is, hey, this should be pretty cheap to shoot. We just need a jungle and a cave, you know? We just need, you know, like abandoned airfield, and should not be expensive. Just like Pirates of the Caribbean, which was expensive, but
the most expensive Mission Impossible movie was Mission Impossible Fallout. That was $178 million.
Was that the one in Dubai?
No, Dubai
was
Ghost
Protocol.
Fallout was, I think, the most recent one. The one with Henry Cavill.
They had the Halo jump.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that was great. That scene was amazing. Let's not digress.
That was $178 million.
I don't know what's going on.
What is Harrison Ford doing for 295?
I also have to say, a Mission Impossible movie, as we discussed, it may not break $1 billion, but it will tickle it, right? It will come close enough, whether it's 700 or 800, it will kind of get there. That's a big brand with the big names attached, and it's known for big stunts, right?
Yeah.
Mission Impossible has that reputation. It's been 15 years since we've seen Indiana Jones. How many people are really Indiana Jones fans? Everyone knows the name. I would expect we've got a great intern. Our intern doesn't know anything. How old is our intern? In her 20s. She does not know anything about Indiana Jones, right? These movies are twice her age. 1981, 1984, 1989. No way has she seen any of those. Possibly seen Crystal Skull, right?
I doubt it, because who comes into a franchise 5 movies deep?
I agree. So in that case, what exactly is Indiana Jones selling? If it's selling it to you and me, okay, fine, that's an audience, but definitely that's not a big enough audience to justify a $300 million film.
Yeah, it's a hard sell, because I understand that there's an international appeal, but like Indiana Jones in particular doesn't have like a Chinese appeal or an Indian appeal or a Middle Eastern appeal or even a European appeal. It's an American professor who's basically going out and finding artifacts related to potentially a Western focused religion. You know what I mean? Like,
what do you think? Do you think this is going to be like a reboot? Like this is where the torch is going to be passed finally from Harrison Ford to the new Indiana Jones, and then they're going to use the IP and launch 5 more after this?
I have no idea. I know that time travel is definitely a part of this movie.
Yeah.
Does that mean they'll use that as an opportunity to reset and create a new Indiana Jones character? Maybe, maybe not. Phoebe Bridges-Waller is in it. She could be the new Indiana Jones character.
Yeah.
I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Just like they tried to do with Tomb Raider.
With Alicia Vikander, yeah.
Yeah. Who I thought was actually a very good
Very
Tomb
good.
Raider.
I love her. I think she's great.
And why did they not then make 3 more Tomb Raiders? Because Tomb Raider is female Indiana Jones, right?
Not far off. It's also a video game IP.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much of an appeal there was for people to watch that movie outside of the video game franchise fans.
But just as a character, irrespective of the genesis of the character, Tomb Raider is kind of the modern take of what a female Indiana Jones would be, right?
Yeah, there's 2 franchises which are definitely that way.
Right.
Lara Croft's Tomb Raider for sure.
Right.
And Nathan Drake in Uncharted, which we saw with Tom Holland.
That's right. This is a little bit off topic, but it's kind of the same thing. When people were talking about James Bond should be a female, our perspective, I think it was yours, but I don't want to like throw you under the bus if you don't agree. Our perspective was, hey, James Bond is a man. Go create a Jamie Bond. Go create a female character that has a different name, different backstory, and that can be successful, as we've seen with Tomb Raider. if Tomb Raider came out now with Alicia Vikander, that would arguably be a bigger film than Harrison Ford and Indiana Jones.
Doubtful. It would be cheaper. It might be more successful in terms of profitability, but I think in overall box office, I still think Indiana Jones holds more of a cultural cachet than Tomb Raider does.
You really think so?
I think so.
So I'm not going to totally disagree with you, but I bet if you went to Disneyland, Disney World, and when everyone came in, they had to go left or right. Left is Tomb Raider and right is Indiana Jones. I would expect that those IPs would kind of be equally popular. I think Tomb Raider, primarily because of Angelina Jolie and primarily because of gaming, have increased substantially in terms of brand recognition. My mom would definitely know Indiana Jones. I would say that our intern and younger people would probably be more likely to know Tomb Raider.
So in terms of recognition, I agree with exactly what you're saying, but I think in terms of following that up, I think the expectation is that the rides for the Indiana Jones movies would be far more fun than the rides for the Tomb Raider.
Yeah, maybe that's
Tomb Raider is not known for its set pieces that way. I'm not saying it isn't. The modern version of the games definitely have set pieces.
Yeah.
But I think as a franchise, every movie in the Indiana Jones has had some cool set piece, right? And we talked about it. Raiders of the Lost Ark had the first opening sequence where he's escaping the boulder. Then Temple of Doom had the rope bridge.
And the mine carts.
Raiders of the Lost Ark had that sequence in the desert where they're escaping on a tank.
Yep.
Crystal Skull, I mean, you didn't watch it, but it had one sequence which, again, very Indiana Jones, regardless of how comically stupid it was. There was a jungle chase where Shia LaBeouf is literally flying on vines trying to catch up as he gets kicked off of a convoy.
Okay.
That was very, very Indiana Jones feeling, even though, again, it was quite silly.
Yeah.
But every movie has had some kind of action beat and action sequence that would translate very well.
Yeah, you're right. Tomb Raider doesn't have a iconic action sequence.
I mean, some great fight sequences. The new versions of the games, there was a fantastic sequence where you have to cross a ravine and there's a crashed B-52 bomber. You're walking over that and the bomber starts to disintegrate and you have to kind of dive off at the last second. Yeah. Then there's a phenomenal sequence where you're escaping down a river. All great sequences in the game. Do I think that those things would translate well to a ride at Disneyland?
Yeah.
Doubtful.
But getting back to the question, is this going to be now the start of a new Indiana Jones reboot franchise? Or do you think it's just going to be kind of the last? Harrison Ford is saying, look, I'll just take one more paycheck, put in another half-assed effort. And
I mean, I hope he doesn't put in a half-assed effort, but I think that this is probably going to be the last of the Harrison Ford-led indie movies.
Yeah.
Having said that, and again, we caveat this by saying neither of us know anything. I've seen one trailer and that's it. I don't want to see any more information about this movie.
Yep.
If Phoebe Waller-Bridges, whatever her name is, I apologize. If her role is done very well and she's, widely accepted as the best part of this, do I think that, the company is going to let her go? I don't think so. I think they'll want to franchise it as long as they can because Indiana Jones still has brand recognition, and then everyone will understand that this is, a pseudo sequel to the Indiana Jones franchise, and it could be the start of their own thing.
I have to say, what's your level of excitement for this film? Sometimes you and I've seen, and we've even seen it this year, a sequel comes out and we're just bouncing. We can't wait to see it. What's your level of enthusiasm for this one?
So I'm very excited. But I think I'm excited for nostalgic purposes, not excited because anything in the trailer I saw is making me oh my God, this looks like it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, I'm tepid. So I would not rearrange my plans, to see this immediately when it comes out. I mean, I will because we do this, but I'm not that level of enthused about it. I'll definitely see it, but I have to say I've got pretty low expectations only because I didn't see Crystal Skull. And I feel like there's been such a layoff between these And I'm not really sure where it goes. Just kind of like one of the things you said about Flash, which I loved. You weren't as in love, but one of the things that audiences, you said, was impacting them is that there's really no room for a sequel. And maybe that's the same thing that I'm feeling about this Dial of Destiny, is that it has to be the last installment for Harrison Ford. And for me, Harrison Ford really made this franchise. He was instrumental, I think, in the first three. It really has his DNA all over it. And if he's not involved going forward, I'm not sure it's an Indiana Jones franchise anymore, right? See, Tomb Raider, for example, Tomb Raider is Tomb Raider, whereas Indiana Jones is the title character, right? He is everything about this franchise.
Yeah, you couldn't call it an Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
I'm happy to have it set in the same universe. I'm happy to have it, maybe we see another movie where Short Round has come back and introduced, and you see some ancillary characters from previous movies. That's also fine by me. Yeah. But I don't think you can call it an Indiana Jones movie. I am 100% in agreement with you on that.
Yeah. Is Shia LaBeouf out of this for sure?
I haven't heard anything about him in it. That's fine.
Where is he in life?
I have no idea. I honestly don't know what's going on with him. Like, he had his little bit of a mental breakdown. I mean, I hope he's well. I had high hopes for him in the industry, but I think everything just kind of got to him.
And we were talking about the other one with Mark Wahlberg and Spider-Man.
Uncharted.
Yeah,
Tom
Uncharted.
Holland. Yeah.
What's the future with Uncharted?
No idea. I haven't heard if they're going to make a sequel or not for that. No clue. That has potential. Again, I don't think the movie did incredibly well, because that was, remember, just at the end of the COVID pandemic. It was one of the first few movies to get released.
Right. Yeah, we saw it in cinemas.
Yeah, it was one of the first. I mean, we had been seeing a lot of movies, but like, it was one of the first few reviews we had done post cinema lockdown, let's put it that way.
Right.
That definitely had potential, and that definitely had moments which reminded me of Indiana Jones. Right. There were certainly elements of, this could be a great indie film if they wanted to be.
Yeah. To be determined. So next week, we're recording this on a Saturday. Will be released on a Monday. Thursday, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is coming out. So we'll review this next week then and give our thoughts about what we thought, huh?
Yeah, I agree. And, again, I hope it does well. I really want it to do well. I want all movies to do well. But, and we will have to come back to this, $300 million plus advertising is absurd for this kind of movie.
I have to say, I like how altruistic you are that you want this to do well. I don't wish it to do badly, but I have to say I'm very ambivalent in terms of whether it does well. And part of me wants it to not be super successful, because I'm not sure if I want this to be replicated. I'm not sure if we want to take 40-year-old IP, remake it, and use de-aging technology and try to recapture lightning in a bottle at super high cost base. In some ways, I think it would be better for us as entertainment consumers to, have the message be, look, you just cannot endlessly recycle the same old thing 15 years after it came out without any logical, story, and expect that consumers are gonna, eat it up. So I don't really want it to do badly, but I definitely don't have any vested interest to see it do great.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is very valid. I would just say that that's probably a two-parter response, in the sense that, I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking about writers, directors, actors who are all working. So, making a movie, we all know, is not easy in Hollywood. It's not just a money thing, but it's also a time-consuming thing. Artists, designers, producers, writers, actors, they spend months, if not years, of their lives on this. In that regard, I wish them success, right? Because you don't want people to feel like they've wasted their time on something, right? Especially because this is an artistic endeavor at the end of the day. But the second part of your statement is 100% right, which is, even though I want it to do financially well, I also understand your viewpoint, which is to say, hey, look, the lesson should also be that you can't take every successful movie from 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and revamp it. Give us something new because the audience will demand more and better, right? It's the same reason that people always get pissed off every September, because ultimately the next iPhone is exactly the same as the last iPhone with slightly better specs. They want something truly new, truly revolutionary. And the only way Apple is going to learn to do that is if, for example, the iPhone 16 makes only a third of what the iPhone 15 makes. So I agree with you. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's probably the only way Hollywood will learn that lesson.
Oh,
so
for sure.
That's not what I would prefer as the way of them learning their lesson. But I guess the upside to this movie making not enough money is that, hey, maybe that's the lesson, right? Is A, make new original content, and B, don't spend all the money in the world on making it.
All right. So we will continue this next week after we've both seen Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Pete, where can folks reach out to us if we want to get their predictions, prognostications, projections, anticipations?
I love it. That's actually great. Why don't you tell us what you think of the franchise? Why don't you tell us what you think is going to happen in this movie? Tweet at us at F&S Podcast. Instagram us. You can DM us at Films and Stuff Podcast. Email us aloha@filmsandstuffpodcast.com. Or, as always, subscribe to our channel, leave a comment. All of those things help us.
We've got a new social media team standing by to respond to your comments and add our commentary as well.
All right. Thanks, Ethan.
Everyone, thank you for your time. Pete, thanks for your time. We will see you all on next week's edition of Films and Stuff. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.